Have you ever thought about the fact that there really is no right way? This has been something that I have been thinking about and actually having multiple conversations with people about, some of my business advisors, my mindset coach, and that I've actually even been having with my clients. And so I was like, I really want to have this conversation with you today because, as what I always say, a recovering perfectionist. We've talked about this on the podcast before, and I say recovering perfectionist because I grew up with this perfectionism tendency where I felt like I always had to do the right thing, say the right thing, follow the right path, making all the perfect right decisions. And that can help, it definitely has helped me in, my high achieving energy. And what I see from a lot of people as well is it can help you to push you and help you to get success and to that drive, versus just like, whatever, I don't care. So it's not like a negative thing. It's something to be mindful of if this is you as well. And the reason is because I can see many instances for me where it did actually hold me back because I wouldn't take action on something until I felt like it was perfect, or I wouldn't do something if I didn't feel like it was the right thing or it was against these, like, quote unquote, the rules of what you're supposed to do. So for example, you're supposed to go to school and get a job, and I still believe those things, right? But that might not be right for everybody. Or you're supposed to, get a corporate job, and then you're supposed to stay in a position for this long, and then you're supposed to get promoted. And we follow these sort of set of rules that, to be totally honest with you, most of the time we've totally made up in our head, or this is like this perception of these rules that we should follow. And for example, again, it's like, oh, you should be in stay at a company for this amount of time, you should be in a role for this amount of time. Certain corporate rules sometimes is like, oh, these like unwritten rules, like you shouldn't ask for a meeting with somebody at a certain level above you, or you shouldn't speak up in maybe a meeting where there's people with higher titles than you. Like these rules that some of this is, yes, you have to understand the culture of the company and you don't want to, ruffle feathers. But oftentimes what I see for people is it's really holding them back, especially when I'm working with executives, leaders, from an organizational standpoint, that in their head, they have created this rule that they can't do something, when in reality, if you were to kind of rewrite that or ride over this rule that you've written, it's going to help you to actually stand out. It's going to help you to be bold and to use your voice. And then I'll say that, as I became as you like mature and as you take on elevated roles, and especially when I became an entrepreneur, where it was like, you can't have everything perfect. There's no such thing as perfect, and you just have to take the step and you have to take the action. You have to keep doing it and you have to be willing to fail. And I get more and more and more comfortable with just trying things and being okay if there's been so many things that I have tried in this journey of running a business that have not worked, that you just have to learn from. And still, every new version, every new level of growth requires that reminder for me. And there's just so many instances where I can go back and think, oh my gosh, we've made in our head these certain rules to follow, when there really aren't those rules, and there's really no right way to do it. The right way is to just do the dang thing, is to take the step, is to keep taking the action to get you forward momentum. Really, the only wrong way, other than obviously like laws, right? There's right in terms of like following the laws, but when it comes to like growing your business or growing in your career, growing your leadership, growing personally or professionally, so much of what we have told ourselves is made up. It's completely made up. We made these rules, these fictitious rules in our head of things that we're not supposed to do. And that is holding you back. I knew it was holding me back, where it's like, oh, I'm not supposed to, call that person. I should wait for someone else to introduce me, or I'm not supposed to reach out to that person. Who said? You did. You made it up. Like, that's what I was saying to myself. And just think of how many times throughout the day or throughout a week or throughout a month that you don't take action or something, you don't do something because you feel like you shouldn't, that you're not allowed to, that it's going to go against something, right? Like there's these rules. And when you start to really realize there is no right way, it's just the way. There's just taking the steps. Because really, whatever your goal is there are 100 different ways to get there. And I think sometimes, especially if you are that person who wants everything right, is you feel like you're waiting for somebody to tell you, well, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, when in reality, there are a plethora of paths that you can take. And many of them can get you to the goal, right? It's just like driving, right? There's, if you're trying to get to a destination, there's multiple different ways. There's multiple different paths. Do you want to drive in the country and the back way? Do you want to hop on the highway? Do you want to take, the detour? There's multiple different ways that can get you to the goal. And there is no right way, because you talk to somebody who loves to take the scenic route, their path is the right way. You talk to somebody who likes to hop on the highway and cruise at 75, that's the right way. They're all getting you to the destination. And so often we limit ourselves to think that there's just one road that's going to get us there. And it really closes off the possibility of sometimes that detour is just what we need. We need to see the trees. We need that extra time of that detour because we're actually not ready yet to get to the destination. You know what I'm saying here? And when you can release the pressure on yourself to find the one exact path and realize there are multiple different ways to do it, then you open yourself up to so much more creativity, so much more possibility, to so much more opportunity, because you're willing to try the different ways and see which is the right path for me at this point in time where I'm at. And you go down one way and you realize like, oh, that's not the way. I'm just going to turn around and go the other way. And so I'm going to challenge you to think about what are these rules that you have made up in your head that really aren't true. And I'm debating if I want to share this exercise, because for those of you listening, I'm like, oh, this would be a great exercise for you to do sometime. I'm going to allude to it. But one of the things that really got me thinking about this was earlier this year, I attended a retreat, and it's for business owners, and they challenged us, and they called it Landmine. And they challenged us to do something, essentially. And we were getting timed, and we were kind of I'm like not giving you all the details, because I'm like, I don't want to ruin it for somebody who might be doing this as like an exercise for like a retreat or something. But ultimately, you had to try and get your partner across what, like, quote unquote, this landmine, and like direct them without stepping on anything. Otherwise they had to go back to the start. And you would just see everybody trying to think of how could they get the fastest time? How could they get their partner across? And it wasn't until we had done multiple rounds and people really started to think outside the box, because so often people were following what other people were doing to get their partner across this landmine. And it wasn't until like the end and people had kind of exhausted kind of following what other people were doing that people really started to get creative and think outside the box, and ended up getting the fastest time. And when they did the debrief of this exercise, and when they had started it, they gave us the rules, right, of what the rules were. And when they did the debrief of this exercise, it was so interesting to see how all of us in our head had added in rules that they never said. They never said certain things, but we all, because of the way they had it set up, it made it seem like we had to like follow these certain rules, even though that was never part of the directions. And so it was such an amazing exercise to get us to think about, like, we really wasn't a rule, but we made this up. And there was such a faster and more efficient and more creative way to get to the solution. And so I really keep that in mind, and I wanted to share that with you as well, as just think of what rules are you following that really aren't rules. Which ones did you make up? And where are you telling yourself that there's some right way? Because I'm just here to tell you there's really not. There's not just one right way. There's just ways. And give them a try and see what works for you. And it's okay if you're like, yep, I'm not doing that way. And so you don't need my permission, but I hope you give yourself permission to try this. And this was what I wanted to share with you today. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this and what some of your biggest takeaways. Please send me a message and let me know what were some of your biggest takeaways, because I know for me, this is something I continue to challenge myself on, is to really think about releasing that idea of things having to be just right or just perfect, and just doing it and just trying it, whether that's in your personal life or in your professional life, and see how creative and how fun and all the possibilities that are out there when you release this expectation on yourself to be right, to be perfect, to follow whatever made up rules that you have in your head.